Hello again, watch friends. Welcome back. This will be the first in a series of videos on calculators. Essentially, my calculators. I know what you may be thinking. Calculators? Well, as I am sure many watch collectors do, I have other interests and hobbies. One of them is calculators, specifically HP calculators. That's Hewlett-Packard. I've been using them since the mid-1970s. I use them now, collect them, and just admire the quality, features, and usability of these excellent machines. So here's part of my collection, the classic series of HP handheld calculators. HP 35, HP 45, HP 65, HP 67. I have an HP 80 business calculator somewhere, but I can't seem to find it. The HP 35. HP calculators revolutionized the work of engineers, scientists, and technical professionals. Previously, slide rules were used, and they were very good at multiplication, division, trig functions, logs, exponents. Good to about 3 decimal places. However, slide rules could not do addition and subtraction, and one had to keep track of the decimal place, which, if you chained calculations together, affected the accuracy of the result, especially with each successive calculation. The HP 35 was HP's first pocket calculator and was introduced in 1972 at a cost of $395. Up till that time, most slide rule calculators had 4 basic functions, plus the occasional exponent, log, or pi functions. All with 8-digit accuracy, of course, and no need to keep track of the decimal point. The HP 35 was the first pocket calculator with trig functions, the first with HP's RPN entry method with a 4-level stack, and the first electronic calculator that was built tough and designed to be repaired. Industrial design was a key design component. All screws are hidden, the keyboard is divided into groups and color-coded based on function, and even the most used keys had a higher contrast on their key labeling. One quick note on the integrity of HP and the HP 35 in particular. Apparently, a bug was discovered with the exponent function after about 25,000 HP 35 calculators had been shipped. Dave Packard, of Hewlett-Packard fame, decided to tell everyone about the bug and offer a free replacement to anyone who asked for it. As it turned out, about 25% of the units were returned, as most owners decided to keep their HP 35 and the letter offering a replacement from HP. The HP 45. Next, HP introduced the HP 45 a year later with more functionality. It had factorials, polar coordinate calculations, trig in degrees, radians, and gradients. The HP 35 could only do trig in degrees, whereas the 45 could do degrees, radians, and gradients. The HP 45 could also do conversions, such as decimal degrees to degrees, minutes, and seconds, and it also could do simple statistics, mean and standard deviation. Other improvements included the 9 storage registers instead of 1, and the ability to do what is called storage register arithmetic, where one could perform operations on the contents of an individual storage register rather than having to recall the values, perform the operations on them, and then store the results again. The HP 45 was the first HP scientific calculator to have a shift key. This almost doubled the number of functions available on the keyboard with minimal clutter. It also was more intuitive and easier to use. For example, on the HP 35, There are sine, cosine, and tangent keys, and a separate arc key. So if you wanted to get the arc sign of a value in the display, you'd press the arc key and then the sine key. On the HP45, arc functions were shifted functions and labeled above the trig keys. So to do the same calculation, as just mentioned, you'd press the F key, the F shift key, and then press the sine key. Still, two keystrokes, but more obvious perhaps, and one less dedicated key on the keyboard. Other natural pairings included common, natural logs, and exponents. Also new on the HP45 was the display formatting. Unlike the HP35, which had what is called standard formatting, where the decimal point placement and number of displayed digits is determined by the calculator, the HP45 allowed the user to determine the number of shown digits in either scientific notation or fixed decimal mode, where the number of desired decimal places are shown. Of course, scientific notation is useful when working with very large or very small numbers. The number of decimal places, 0 through 9, can be displayed. Again, the display is left justified and includes trailing zeros. The calculator maintained full precision internally, regardless of what was displayed on the screen. One other usability improvement of the HP45 is notable: how it handled exponents. One would say raise 3 to the 5th power, and it would make sense to perform that calculation as it's naturally said. This is the case on the HP45. You press 3, then the Enter key, then 5, and then Shift Y to the X. 243 is displayed, of course. On the HP35, the calculator function was X to the Y, rather than Y to the X. So a little bit of mental gymnastics was required, since you had to perform either 3, Enter, 5, swap the X and Y registers, X to the Y, more cumbersome than necessary, or you could press 5, Enter 3, X raised to the Y, and that would be backwards, to say the least. So, if you think of the Enter key, change the word Enter with the word raised, you would perform the calculation like you'd say it on the HP45. You would say 3 raised to the 5th power. The HP45 method of Y to the X has been standard on every HP calculator since the HP45. The HP65. The HP65 was the first HP programmable calculator with permanent storage. It used small magnetic cards to store programs which could later be read back into the machine. This negated one of the main complaints of calculators of the day, which was that when you turned off the calculator, you lost its contents. Although the HP65 was limited to only 100 steps, it was a breakthrough machine and permitted keystroke programming, meaning that the keystrokes you used to solve a problem were the steps of the program it saved and could be used repeatedly with different input values. A huge boon for doing repetitive calculations. It was introduced in 1974, as I mentioned before, at a cost of $795. There are many interesting aspects of the HP65. Foremost was that it had more or less the same form factor as the HP35, 45, 55, and 80. It was released less than 2 years after the HP35 and was advertised by HP as a quote-unquote personal computer. This before that term had come into common use. Remember, this was 1974. Most notable was the tiny magnetic cards that were used to write programs to and read programs from. These little mag cards could hold 100 program steps, and each step was a keyboard instruction represented by a key code. For example, the Enter key was in the 4th row, and the first position or column. Therefore, its key code is 41. Fourth row, first position. Pretty straightforward given the LED numerical display. It wasn't until the HP41C calculator, introduced 6 years later, that functions could be displayed as their name using an alphanumeric display. The tiny cards had a magnetic surface on one side and a writable surface on the other. The card could be slid into a slot at the top of the calculator so as to label the top row of program-defined keys. Some people, myself included, actually used rub-on letters to give the card labels a more professional look. Users could also buy pre-made programs that came on mag cards, which could be read into the machine. These application packs, as they were called, were available in a number of areas, including math, aviation, statistics, electrical engineering, finance, and many more. Up to 3 dozen program cards were provided in each pack, with pre-written and tested programs and a user manual provided with each. The HP65 took the idea of a shift key to provide more functions per key, perhaps to its limit. There were 3 color-coded shift keys, F, F inverse, and G, which provided up to 4 functions for each key. The main key function, the shifted function printed in gold above the key, and the inverse of the gold label function using the F shift key, or F inverse shift key, and then finally the blue label function on the face of the key when used with the G shift key. Again, a very economical and clean keyboard layout. Some additional firsts for HP were the ability to split the integer and fraction part of a number, ability to do degrees, minutes, seconds arithmetic, adding and subtracting, octal to decimal conversions, and vice versa. The user manual was quite well done, explaining not just the functions of the calculator, but including sections suggesting orderly ways to create a program. Plenty of examples and well-written text make the HP65 manual easy to read and follow, and a harbinger of well-written HP manuals to come. Obviously, the most exciting aspect of the HP65 was programming. It was an amazing machine for its time, and is still exceptional, although it has been far surpassed in functionality by various new calculators and computers. Programming was done via keystrokes, and as mentioned, there were 100 steps available for a program. No line numbers were provided, just the key code, as I mentioned, and labels A through E were used for function names, and they could be called by either pressing the label key or as a subroutine from a go-to statement. 4 conditional tests between the X and Y registers in the stack, and 2 flags were provided to allow conditional branching. Programs could be stepped through one step at a time with a single step key, but there was no backstep key. The HP67. The HP65 was succeeded in 1976 with the introduction of the HP67. This calculator could also read and write data in addition to program steps, like the 65, and had more memory, 224 steps instead of 100. Used memory more efficiently than the HP65, so you really had more equivalent steps because all the key codes were merged, not just some of them. Better editing, better comparisons, better branching, nested subroutines, and indirect addressing. In other words, it could use the value in a stored register to determine to branch to that step number. And it listed for $450. Simply amazing. The HP67 calculator was the same form factor as the HP65, but had a number of usability improvements as well. One area was program storage and editing. Line numbers now accompanied each program step, shown in the one-line display. A backstep key let you move backward through a program, and a go-to key allowed you to go directly to a specific program line number in program mode. Like its predecessor, the HP67 had 3 shift keys to access all the functions on the keyboard, but now they were labeled F, G, and H. Because of the increased number of functions on the keyboard, supposed customer feedback, the F and inverse F approach to shift keys was abandoned. One other change, which took some previous HP65 users some time to learn to adjust, myself included back then, was that the additional functions on each key were labeled below the key instead of above a key, like on the 65. Fortunately, with use, it was a short learning curve. Another useful feature was that when writing programs to magnetic cards, the calculator modes were also included. There were many improvements in the programming area as well. 3-level subroutine nesting was available. Comparisons could now be done between the X register in the stack and 0, not just between the X and Y register. 4 flags were now included, one of which indicated data entry. Looping could be done incrementally in addition to the previous calculator's decrement looping, and there were now 10 instead of 5 user-defined keys. The data entry flag was especially useful for allowing a program to either accept an input or calculate a result when a program used labels keys to, say, enter 3 or 4 arguments and calculate the 4th. Perhaps one of the most exciting programming improvements was the ability to do indirect addressing. This was very powerful, as it gave the user the ability to use a calculated value stored in a specific register to control subroutine addresses, display format, control store and recall addresses, and act as a loop counter value. Using indirect addressing allowed for some pretty creative and powerful programs to be written. Other new features included the ability to read from and write data to the mag cards, merging a partial program from cards with the current program, either manually or under program control, 224-step memory, 26 storage registers instead of the HP65's 100-step memory and 9 storage registers. And as before, the HP67 was supported by a very large program library available as packs in a dozen categories. In addition, there were programs solution books that spanned over 40 areas available to users. The HP67 lived for about 8 years, introduced in 1976 and retired in 1984. When it was first available, it listed for $450, or a little more than half of what the HP65 sold for just 2 years earlier. Through more efficient chip count and content, HP was able to provide more functionality in the HP67 than the HP65, and at a lower cost. The HP80. Also in 1973, HP introduced the HP80 for financial professionals. It could do time value of money and compound interest calculations. Number of payments, interest rate, payment amount, present and future value were all included. If you entered any 4 of these values, it would amazingly calculate the 5th or unknown value. This became a theme for HP ads. They introduced successive models, some for scientific use and some for financial use. As I mentioned before, I have an HP80 that I obtained in the mid-1970s. Unfortunately, I can't locate it. It's around somewhere, and hopefully without the battery stored in it. I would be remiss if I didn't mention the best, if not the best, resource for information on HP calculators. It is the Museum of HP Calculators. I'll put a link in the description. The Museum of HP Calculators describes and displays just about all HP calculators ever made, from 1968 to about the year 2000. Also included are a few interesting later models. Each model is described thoroughly, pictures are provided, detailed technical specs, and anecdotes are available. For the true HP Calc enthusiast, and for about $40, you can buy a thumb drive, I did, of approximately 1,700 documents, including HP manuals, applications packs, HP Digest, HP Journals, HP Keynotes. The Keynotes was the publication that HP provided for their calculator users. Programs and brochures in Adobe Acrobat format. All can be viewed and printed. There are also scanned books from Synthetics, Grapevine, Design, and NASA, and additional images. This collection totals about 14 gigabytes of information, much of it in color. Both the museum website, which is free, and the thumb drive are highly recommended. Dave Hicks, a self-described HP calculator addict since the age of 13, has done an excellent job curating the info and providing a place for like-minded HP nuts, myself included, to learn about and share HP info and lore. Thanks, Dave. I know this has been a long video, but as you can tell, I'm passionate about calculators as much as I am about watches. So as usual, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.